All right. So just a reminder that this talk is being recorded and will be posted on Great Tree Zen Women's Temple YouTube site. And remind everyone about the spirit and practice of dana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of dana paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and the practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice dana are to offer support to those who share the teachings, such as Andrea this morning, to support places of spiritual practice, such as Great Tree, and to give without judgment of expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. You can either do this directly or through Great Tree, and we will pass it on to them. And I will drop the link to Great Tree's donation site in the chat. And please remember that if your dana is for Andrea specifically, please email saying that. Thanks. And I'll pass it to Anne. You're muted, Anne.
Oh gosh, I wouldn't unmute. Okay, we're fortunate this morning to be hearing the second of 3 talks by Andrea Ansei Martin about the book that she edited of Katagiri Roshi's teachings, titled The Light That Shines Through Infinity, Zen and the Energy of Life. So a little background. Andrea Ansei Martin began practicing at Minnesota Zen Meditation Center in 1978 after practicing transcendental meditation for several years. She became a student of Dainin Katagiri Roshi and received the lay Buddhist precepts from him in 1980. She now heads the Dainin Katagiri Archives and is the author of a biographical essay titled Ceaseless Effort, The Life of Dainin Katagiri. She's edited 2 of his books of teachings, one, Each Moment is the Universe, in 2007, and subsequently The Light That Shines Through Infinity in 2017. In 2020, she was recognized as a lay teacher by Ted O'Toole. Andrea is a retired research librarian blessed with a large family of children, stepchildren, and grandchildren. And I think Tasia would like to say a few words.
Yes, I just wanted to mention something. I talked a little bit last week about how admirable I think it is that Andrea has been able to edit Katagiri Roshi's talks, because it's very difficult in many ways. But one of the things that Andrea and I talked afterwards, and one of the things that she mentioned to me that sort of really struck me, is that when we were studying with Katagiri Roshi, we often really didn't know what he was talking about. It was a little bit difficult to explain in words, and he tried. And yet she said what we were all doing is we were trying to meet him, trying to understand what he was saying. And I feel like that is what she's done very beautifully in these edited talks of Katagiri Roshi's. And this particular book, I think, has really elicited his voice in some way. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, and thank you again for coming, Andrea. We so enjoyed your talk last week, and I'm so looking forward to this week. Is she pinned, Trey?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tejo and Anne and Trey. I'm very happy to be with you and see you all again this week. And I noticed that Tomoe Katagiri is here with us this morning too. And I just want to say good morning, Tomoe-san. Nice to see you. Also, I want to say that when I talk about Katagiri Roshi's teachings, these are really coming to you now, not during the book when I represented Katagiri Roshi's voice, but now when I talk to you today, I'm really giving you my own voice. I'm filtering what I understood or learned or have been practicing in the 30 years since he passed away. So I'm not being Katagiri today, I'm being me, and I'm just telling you how I work with this teaching for myself. Last week, I talked about seeing life as a totality, in this totality, energy is flowing through the universe and things come and go out of existence in a continuous process of creation and change. We're all traveling through this universal process together. And this is my understanding of the meaning of the Buddha way. Today, I want to look at a way that we can think about how our Buddha nature appears within this totality. And I want to start with this beautiful statement from chapter 4, which is in the first part, Life Force and Life. And this links our Buddha nature to light. I'm just going to read this part from the book. Buddha's teaching constantly tells you how sublime human nature is and how great our human capacity is. In Buddhism, this great capacity is called light. Each and every one of us has this light. When you look at your life and see how selfish and egotistic human beings are, you don't believe you have a great sublime capacity. But you don't discover your great capacity by evaluating and judging your human value. If you are thinking in that way, you have already shut yourself off from that light. Don't judge yourself as selfish or egoistic only. You are something more. So whatever you think about your life, first, accept yourself as a person who has a great capacity. Then, in whatever situation you may be, calm your mind and take care of your life positively. So a symbol for Buddha nature in Japan is the blossoming plum tree. In this book, you meet these plum trees in chapter 7, which is called Let the Flower of Your Life Force Bloom. This chapter is Katagiri Roshi's commentary on 2 fascicles of Dogen's Shobogenzo, plum blossoms or baika, and flowers in the sky, kuge. And these were Katagiri Roshi's last major teachings. He was hospitalized just a few weeks after he finished speaking on baika, and he never resumed teaching. So these teachings to me are very precious. Japanese plum trees are not the same as the plum trees we have in the United States. They have a bent and gnarled trunk with complicated asymmetrical branching patterns. These trees bloom in late December or early January, I guess, depending on which part of Japan they're in, maybe even later. And the blooms appear before the blossoms do. And when the blossoms appear, it's still winter and the ground is covered with white snow. Then all at once, I don't know if it's on the same day but pretty close, I guess, millions of scarlet red blossoms suddenly appear in the midst of this barren landscape. It's Katagiri used the word shocking. It's a shocking scene of life energy bursting forth from this white, colorless, barren landscape. These plum trees are associated with the winter solstice and the arrival of spring. The solstice is an important occasion in Zen monasteries in Japan. It is recognized as the day when the receptive yin energy reaches its completion point and the active yang energy starts to move. The solstice is a pivot point where the two energies of life, yin and yang, are both present as the total manifestation of life energy. In Taoism, they use the phrase hinge of Tao. In his teachings on impermanence, Katagiri Roshi coined the phrase that may be related to this. He said, the pivot of nothingness. This pivot is the point where life energy turns away from formlessness toward form, and energy flows into the material world as a new moment of time. Those teachings are given in his earlier book, Each Moment is the Universe. But the pivot also appears a few times in The Light That Shines Through Infinity. So today I want to say something about this spiritual pivot. For me, being able to visualize something that's happening almost in a mechanical sense is helpful. It gives me a structure to hang other things on. It gives me a place to tie in particular Buddhist philosophies that you will find in this book, but which I'm not actively talking about, such as the Madhyamaka, the Yogacara, and the Tathagatagarbha. But in the end, this pivot is really just my idea. It isn't like there's a pivot out there somewhere. It's something that's happening, a movement of energy. This pivot starts with the fundamental or original emptiness of life. I think it's a weirdness of Buddhism that emptiness, which is a beautiful teaching and a liberating awareness, is represented by words that feel so dangerous. Words like nothingness, no self, the void. Those words feel ominous somehow, maybe because they threaten our egocentric point of view. In Buddhist philosophy, the Sanskrit word shunyata represents having an awareness of the emptiness or voidness or nothingness that constitutes ultimate reality. It represents the vast ground where everything begins and ends. A Buddhist dictionary says shunyata is the fertile undifferentiation out of which all apparent entities, distinctions, and dualities arise. So shunyata, emptiness or nothingness, is not a negation of existence. It's an affirmation of the creativity of the universe. Sometimes I think it would have been better to keep the original word shunyata and not translate it. It represents the ground of being that gives rise to the material world, and not nothingness or true voidness. It seems to me these words might be resonating differently for us than they would have from our ancestors from China and Asia, who might have had a different point of view. When they were influenced by their native Taoist understanding of how life works, our Zen ancestors in China would have recognized words like nothingness and emptiness as yin, the feminine principle, the dark, receptive, fertile space that gives birth to yang, the masculine principle, the bright, active presence of the 10,000 things, meaning the material world. Maybe you could say that emptiness is like a womb in which life is pregnant with itself, gives birth to itself, lives for a moment as the material world, and then returns to emptiness with energy to create the next moment. There is no agent or force outside the system. Life generates and uses its own energy. Normally, this is beyond our human perception, although in certain circumstances, our mind does let it reveal itself to us. Katagiri Roshi has, to me, a fabulous way of describing it, so I want to read a little bit more from this chapter. This is more from chapter 4, The Light of the Self. Every day from moment, did I write that down right? Every day from moment to moment, the whole world arises like images in bas relief sculpture. If you calm the functioning of your consciousness, you can actually see images coming up from the background of space. It's like watching a dance. Something is constantly moving. In the Tao of physics, Fritjof Capra recognizes that activity as Shiva's dance, the cosmic dance of creation and destruction. In Buddhism, we say it is the continuous stream of life energy, and it is called continuous practice. In the realm of continuous practice, there is a great opportunity. You can see the universe coming up as one whole. It's just like a television. Push the button, and the myriad beings existing in the vast expanse of the universe immediately come into one screen. That one screen is called the self. Your true self is not something separated from others. It is interconnected and constantly working with others. Where? It's working in the huge universe. In Japanese, that working is called komyo, light. The functioning energy of the whole world is the light of the self. Because light is working from moment to moment, the whole world constantly manifests itself as the human world. In China, the spirit of this energy flow is depicted in paintings of natural landscapes using black ink on white paper. In those landscapes, the sky, the clouds, and water are white, unpainted areas that represent the underlying reality or the source. The material world is emerging from that source, and it's depicted by trees, plants, rocks, mountains, and small people and dwellings or structures, sometimes bridges. Chinese poets gazed at paintings like this as a form of meditation. They imagined themselves as living within this active landscape, and that they themselves were emerging from the background source and dissolving back into it. And then they wrote poems to try to capture the spirit of that reality. In the Zazen meditation that we do, we might settle into that sense of stillness and become aware and receptive to the existence of this underlying life energy, and that this energy is living through us and giving form and shape to our lives. When Katagiri Roshi taught the pivot of nothingness, he connected emptiness, form, impermanence, and interdependence to explain how it all works together to create the universe as a magnificent event occurring in every moment of time. I did some thinking about that while I was drinking tea recently. And I thought that for a teacup, while its beauty as an object has great value, it's the empty space within its shape that is essential to its life. Without that space of emptiness, a teacup doesn't really exist as a teacup. That teacup emptiness is its capacity or its potential for something to happen. It can hold tea. The cup's capacity is useless on its own. It depends on certain conditions. A time and occasion for tea drinking, perhaps the arrival of a guest, someone to prepare the tea with tea leaves and hot water, maybe a pretty serving tray. When all the conditions are harmoniously arranged, people can enjoy a precious moment of drinking tea together. The emptiness of the teacup allows the form of the teacup to function. And the functioning gives meaning to the teacup's life. And it's the same with us. Emptiness is the sublime capacity of our human life to function in a way that shows us that our life is worthwhile. According to Katagiri Roshi's pivot teaching, there is a mysteriously generative moment when we are all interconnected in emptiness as one formless being. And then life starts to move toward form. At the pivot, suddenly everything bursts forth as the countless individual forms, beings, and happiness of the material world, happenings of the material world, including us. He says, this is also from the same chapter, the ordinary idea is that when you were born, the universe was already here. You were born into this world, and then you try to understand it. But if you try to understand in the ordinary way, you will never understand, because you were not born into the world that was already here. You and the whole world were born together. You were born simultaneously with mountains, rivers, and the whole universe. That is the Buddhist teaching of interdependent co-origination. Even though we exist in the world of form, we are still interconnected as one universal being. Unfortunately for us, as human beings, our ego consciousness hides that from our awareness, as if covering it with a veil. And this is our fundamental human ignorance. We forget where we come from and start discriminating one thing from another as if those were separate beings. And then our afflictive desires start to appear. For me, remembering that my existence is always coming from and returning to the ground of being is a way of calming my body and mind. There is a reset button, maybe like a TV set, I don't know. There's a reset button I can push inside that allows me to receive the next moment in a fresh way that allows things to develop on their own in the best way without my interference. If I think of Katagiri's nothingness as no thingness, it's easier to imagine the original vastness where everything exists together with no lines of separation. This cosmic vastness or emptiness is called our original nature, our ground of being. It is sometimes called Buddha, mind, true self, reality, or universal consciousness. If you encounter it directly, you realize your Buddha nature. So here's a little story about a friend of mine. Soon after the stay-at-home orders were issued when the pandemic began, she wrote this little story or a posting on Facebook about some gratitude that had arisen in her life and surprised her. To help her get through the pandemic, she went shopping at her local craft store to get supplies to support her hobby. And when she got there, the store was very crowded. There were long lines of people waiting for service. She reported that she was feeling very annoyed and cranky about the whole situation. But then suddenly something happened. Her point of view shifted entirely, and her heart was filled with love for everything that was going on around her. She saw that all those shoppers were just like her. They all loved making things, and that joy would help them get through the pandemic. And she felt like celebrating. She felt that she had something in common with them. So what happened? She didn't say, but I think she had a taste of her inborn Buddha nature. My friend is a Zen meditator. I think she just instinctively or habitually stopped paying attention to her grouchy thoughts, as we train ourselves to do. This happens because Zazen is a practice of renewal, being willing to let go of our thoughts and feelings and start fresh in every moment. So for an instant, she was free of that self-centered, egocentric concept-forming mind that clouds our view with ideas of good or bad, right and wrong. And she was, for an instant, present in that original ground of being, merged with everything. And then from that place, she emerged or unfolded back into her everyday life as a slightly changed being, filled with a feeling of universal love and belonging to something bigger than herself. But she herself was not aware of that. She was only aware of the peace and happiness that she suddenly felt. So in the section that I read earlier, Katagiri said, use the image of the sculpture. He said, every day from moment to moment, the whole world arises like images in bas-relief sculpture. So I want to talk about that sculpture a little bit. Bas-relief sculpture portrays realistic figures that seem to be in the process of emerging from a solid background that is retained so that it can be mounted on a wall, usually on the top part of a wall where it serves as a frieze, an architectural element. Katagiri Roshi uses that sculpture to help us imagine the universe emerging from empty space as one being with distinctive individual parts. There is a sense of something emerging from space or nothingness, which yet continues to be present. Having both present is the sense of the essence of oneness, or the term the whole world. It has a dynamic feeling to it. Before the carving or sculpting process, emptiness was, in a sense, the blank piece of stone, and the potential form was on the inside, invisible, but a potentiality of shape. During the carving or sculpting, forms emerged and became visible as figures. The emptiness was now invisible, and it was on the inside of the stone as the original nature of the stone. So I've been thinking about this pivoting as a kind of turning inside out. In the beginning, life is within emptiness as formless presence. Then at the pivot of nothingness, emptiness begins turning itself inside out. Nothing is left behind. Following the laws of interdependent co-origination, life then completely manifests itself as the entire material world. Now, form is visible as individual beings, all of us, and emptiness is dispersed within us. Either way, both aspects are there. And I think this is the essence of what Buddhism means by oneness. And I'm thinking maybe this is why there is a dot of the opposite color inside the eternally rotating waves of the yin-yang symbol. That represents Tao, the way, the rhythm of life. And perhaps it's even what Avalokiteshvara is talking about in the Heart Sutra when he says that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. If we can understand that the original vastness of life called Buddha has turned itself inside out and is within our human form right now, we have a way to make sense of what it means to say we are Buddha, or we have Buddha nature, or as Dogen understood it, we are Buddha nature. Either way, that emptiness inside us is the jewel of Buddha that is waiting for us to discover it in ourselves. So if we revisit the quotation I opened with, maybe it has more resonance when Katagiri Roshi says, Buddha's teaching constantly tells us how sublime human life is and how great our human capacity is. In Buddhism, this great capacity is called light. Each and every one of us has this light. So whatever you think about your life, first accept yourself as a person who has a great capacity. Then in whatever situation you may be, calm your mind and take care of your life positively. So for Dogen, the plum blossom is a symbol of the intimate relationship between oneness and multiplicity. One plum blossom has 5 petals. The flower represents oneness, and its 5 petals represent multiplicity, the human world, and both are Buddha. The flower is not a flower without its petals, and the petals don't exist unless there is a flower. And that's one of those Zen twists that says one in all and all in one. In Baika, Dogen says, The old plum tree is within the human world and the heavenly world. The old plum tree manifests both human and heavenly worlds in its treeness. Katagiri Roshi said this is pure oneness. There is no difference between all sentient beings and Buddha. He said that the most important point in Buddha's teaching is to see ourselves and others in terms of this pure oneness. It is the basis of the Bodhisattva vow to save all beings. If Dogen and Katagiri see the whole world in the blooming of one flower, can we see the whole world blooming in ourselves? Can we see it in each other? Can we understand our stressful lives as the blooming of Buddha, or politics as Buddha? How about accepting our delusions as Buddha? Dogen says, yes, delusions too are Buddha. Every aspect of everyday life is a magnificent event. Driving to work is a flower blooming. Changing a diaper is a magnificent event. Still, it's hard to figure out a way to live in the world as individuals and make peace with the messy surface of everyday life. How do we live in a way that reconciles being separate human beings connected to the oneness of all life at the same time? Katagiri Roshi did not offer big answers to those questions, but he was always telling us to just go back to every single detail of everyday life and pay attention to it. See whatever it is as Buddha and approach it as Buddha yourself. Handle others and yourself with wisdom and compassion. Take care of yourself, but don't attach to yourself too much. Just do what life calls on you to do and don't complain. He said, whatever activity you do, you can open your life and fit into the rhythm of this very moment. When you fit into the rhythm of the great energy of being, you feel relief. You realize that you are allowed to live. You are permitted to exist in this world because the whole world is blooming within your human body. At that time, you become you as you really are. You can stand up there and take care of everyday life as it really is. So I want to end with one more thought about this. Katagiri Roshi is always showing us that there are two aspects to our lives. On the surface of life, we are separate people with a body, a mind, and a self-centered point of view. This is our provisional self, or our small self, self with a lowercase s. But in the depth of life, we are everything in the universe. That is our true self, or big self with a capital S. Zen practice is about uniting these two, circulating our energy by bringing big self upward into everyday life and relaxing the small self so it can drop down into the depth of the emptiness. That opens us up to an astonishing vitality that we can receive in everyday life. If you accept the idea that your own life exists in two worlds, interconnected by the flow of or circulation of cosmic energy, you can see that the ground or root or source of your existence is the original Buddha energy. But when that energy is manifested in individual forms, you are that energy. So you are you, and you are also Buddha. The Buddha you are right now has a creative aspect, because at the end of every moment, your life force energy joins back up and becomes the formless energy of emptiness and the source of the next moment. But the energy you pour back into that ground is different from the energy you received because it passed through your life and you used it in a certain way. Katagiri Roshi sometimes used the word perfumed to hint at the wisp of change you bring to the whole system just by living in one moment. It means that we constantly influence and create the future by the way we live right now. So if you are Buddha, what is your Dharma? What is your teaching? Katagiri Roshi really understood the significance of human life. He told us we were powerful. He asked us to take good care of our lives and to live on the basis of togetherness. I realize my talk today maybe came across as a little philosophical, but Katagiri Roshi said, Buddhism is not a philosophical teaching. It is a teaching of human action. In any situation, I think, before we act, we can pause, we can open ourselves and invite energy to come up from the depths of our lives and into our daily awareness. Then our action can be what Katagiri Roshi called swimming on the surface with your foot touching the ground. I think that's the idea of complete and right action. So I'm going to stop there and leave that with you and invite you to share any stories of your own or thoughts or follow up with any questions I left you with. Thank you so much.